Hi everyone, let's begin with the next chapter under MRCS. We are done with spirochetes and chlamydia. We are off to doing rickettsia, something which is, I've always seen there is a paucity of mnemonics out here, and that is why students tend to either ignore this or tend to just make an adjustment that this is a question that we're not going to get right. But I hope after this, at the end of this lecture, you're able to not only attempt your questions, but you're confident as well. Okay, so let's start rickettsia. Some points are already known because this MRCS family has a lot of commonalities. Firstly, this is an obligate intracellular organism. Anything that is intracellular means it will need cells. It will only grow on a cell line. It will only and only grow on a cell line. It will never ever grow on any artificial media. So you can't grow it on any blood agar, chocolate agar kind of thing. You will always need a cell line. Similarly, you had the same situation with chlamydia also. Chlamydia was also an obligate intracellular organism. Fine. Also, what you have for rickettsia is that this is an arthropod-borne infection, like a louse or a tick or a mite or some arthropod will be there. And whenever the arthropod will come and bite, that area is going to have a rash, of course. So if the arthropod is there, a bite is there. A bite is there means a rash is there. But there's one exception. Coxiella is not arthropod bone. Coxiella is associated with many things, like one of the roots is inhalation. Inhalation, inoculation, ingestion. It's not to do with any arthropod. So simple. There is no bite going to happen. If there's no bite, this means there's no rash. So I see that all the rickettsia which are arthropod borne are going to have a rash, whereas Coxiella is not arthropod borne. It has nothing to do with arthropod, so it is not going to have a rash. So bite hai to rash hai, nahi hai to nahi hai. That is how we learn it. One more thing that is common in all of them, especially when there is a vector, arthropod, tick or mite or louse involved. So there will be some kind of a reservoir host from which the vector is going to come and give it to the humans. Now this has basically organism has entered into our bloodstream, right? So from that local bite or whichever route, it has come into our bloodstream. And this means this is going to go and damage. It has entered into our bloodstream means the most important point is going to be endothelial damage. That is the most important part of all of these. That is going to be endothelial damage. And all of us know from our basics that whenever the blood vessel gets damaged, endothelium gets damaged, we are predisposed to occlusion, thrombosis, clot formation hota hai na. Remember Virchow's triad? Virchow's triad says that whenever there is endothelial damage, there is going to be a blood clot, and that is what is going to happen over here. That's a general pathogenesis for all. Okay, so now I have a table which I know is your not so favorite table. So here we have something known as the first two, which you can see typhus, that is going to be the typhus group of fever. Next few that we have, they are belonging to the spotted fever family. And then we have something called scrub typhus. So this is not a mandatory classification, but what is their organism? First, I'll tell you their organisms. So please note there is an epidemic typhus and an endemic typhus, which has the P in it. Epidemic has a P in it. So which is going to be caused by Rickettsia prowazekii, because prowazekii also has a P in it. Okay, then this means for endemic typhus, endemic means endemic to an area, matlab ki very strong for a particular area. So I'll have to keep the word typhi in it. That is caused by Rickettsia typhi. So when there's a confusion, who causes Rickettsia prowazekii versus typhi? Who causes epidemic versus endemic? So remember, epidemic has a P, that is Rickettsia prowazekii. Endemic is going to be to an area, Rickettsia typhi. Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, R for R, Rickettsia rickettsii. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is going to be caused by Rickettsia rickettsii. Indian tick typhus, African tick typhus. Dekho, African tick typhus to couldn't have been simpler because African tick typhus is caused by Rickettsia africae. It is caused by Rickettsia africae. So simple, Africa has to come together. But what is Indian tick typhus caused by? This is caused by Rickettsia corneri. Please remember how I learned it is corona. Sounds like corona. Corona India mein maximum hua tha at the end of it, right? At the end of it, India took up the lead. So Indian tick typhus is caused by Rickettsia corneri. Now we come to this. This you'll have to ratto, no mnemonic needed. That is Rickettsia acari causes rickettsial pox. And finally we have scrub typhus, which is starting with S. So this is caused by an Orientia cause, Orientia susugamushi. Very weird name. Susugamushi is going to be the scrub typhus. Let's do a very quick recap. When we are talking about the epidemic typhus, Rickettsia prowazekii, endemic typhus, Rickettsia typhi, Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, Rickettsia rickettsii. African Tick Typhus, Rickettsia africae. Indian Tick Typhus, more of corona, so Rickettsia connery. Rickettsial pox is going to be Rickettsia lacari, and scrub typhus is going to be Rickettsia susuggamushi. Sorted? Now these are the organisms. Now you need to know the arthropod vectors. For that you will have to again first do a mnemonic with me, and that is let fen tria psm. I know the mnemonic is not making much of sense, but trust me, you repeat it thrice and this is the best mnemonic possible. What do I mean by let fen tria and psm? So L stands for louse, L stands for louse, and ET is going to stand for epidemic typhus. So epidemic typhus is going to be spread by the louse. Then what is fen? So F will obviously stand for flea, and N will tell me this is to do with endemic typhus. So now it's easy. If you ever have a confusion which is epidemic, which is endemic, you know fen has N in it. So endemic typhus, and louse is going to be epidemic typhus. What is tria? So tria ka T is definitely taking me towards a tick. The tria T is definitely taking me towards the tick. So tick is going to be seen in Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, in Indian Tick Typhus, in African Tick Typhus. All the tick typhus. So tick the word here. Okay. Finally, we are left with PSM. What is PSM? Again, please note PSM mein this time the last organism has to be taken. That is mite. And that is going to be in rickettsial pox and in scrub typhus. The susuggamushi or the scrub typhus are spread by mite. Let's do a recap. I'll write down the main mnemonic over here. It is let, fen, tria, PSM. Let, fen, tria, PSM. So again, when you're talking about epidemic typhus, can I write louse over here? When I'm talking about endemic typhus over here, I will write flea. Then I say I pick up three: Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, Indian Tick Typhus, African Tick Typhus, and for all three of them I'm going to write tick. So there's a tick, tick, tick that I do. Then I have two things, that is the scrub typhus and the rickettsial pox. The rickettsial pox and the scrub typhus, for both of them I will write M and M, that is mite. Life has become easy, isn't it? So let, fen, tria, PSM is going to be your most important thing. Out of these, I'm going to first start off. You don't need to know the details of all. You need to first start off with this epidemic typhus, because this is also known as jail fever. Epidemic ki tarah it has spread in the jail. Epidemic ki tarah it has spread in the jail. A quick revision: because it was epidemic, can you tell me which organism? Provalski. And let mnemonic ke saath se, this is going to be by louse. Now what I want you to know is some 2-3 note points which many students miss. I've got you as a tiny little note at the bottom because many students tend to miss out on this information. Firstly, there is a mnemonic which I have made, that is louse is leaving. Louse is leaving matlab louse is leaving the jail. It's time to leave the jail means that louse definitely caused this. We know louse was the vector, but whenever the patient will start having fever, the louse is going to leave. Why? Because this is heat sensitive. Please remember, this is heat sensitive. So it will say, oh, the body temperature is rising, I'm going to leave. So remember, on fever, there is going to be leaving of the louse. So the louse is leaving, firstly. Secondly, many people believe that this is a zoonotic disease. No, this is not a zoonotic disease. It is not the louse that is biting. This louse is going to be a lazy louse. This is basically entry happening into the body via abrasions. So this is not a louse bite that is happening. This is an abrasions wala thing happening. So now I have learned, not only is the louse leaving, but the louse is also very lazy. Louse is also very lazy. Lazy means that lazy louse. Lazy louse means it's not biting, it's only getting crushed onto the abraded skin. Now let's talk about the other one. Of course, before I go to the endemic one, of course you will ask me that what exactly is happening. Sab kuch to pad liya, but if the louse or the flea or anything comes, what exactly happens? The most important thing happening is a rash. And please note, the rash in all the cases is going to occur first on the trunk and then on the extremities. First it is going to occur on the trunk, then on the extremities. However, in Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, see Rocky Mountain, you do mountaineering. Mountaineering, how do you do? With your hands and feet, right? You first have to hold on to the rocks and go up and up, right? So remember, Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, it starts in the extremities. and then goes to the trunk. For all the others that I will be teaching you, whether it is epidemic or endemic or anything, it will start on the trunk, then go on the limbs, but in Rocky Mountain spotted fever, from the extremities to the trunk. So remember, for epidemic typhus, the incubation period is 5 to 15 days. Patient has usual fever and chills. You know, fever hua to the louse is going to leave. Then there's a rash which occurs first on the trunk and the limbs, and later on patient can have fatality in 40% of the cases because patient becomes delirious, he is comatose. These are severe complications. So this was supposed to be epidemic typhus. After some time, the typhus ended up sleeping off, and this then reactivated later. Epidemic typhus can also have a reactivation stage later on, which is known as the Brill-Zinsser disease or the recrudescent typhus. So repeating once again, this is not something that a new flea or a louse has bitten. No, this is just the original disease which slept off for some time, then got reactivated, but the reactivation will not be very severe. So remember, there is no vector and no severity that you have to worry about. This was about epidemic. If I ask you about endemic, I think you know. Endemic was what? Let me take your mnemonic test. Endemic typhus was because of Rickettsia typhi, and let fen. Fen matlab endemic typhus was because of flea, and flea can have any mode. I have written every possible mode possible for the flea. Flea full mode se aayega, right? So Rickettsia typhi flea. Now after that, I'm not going to repeat. Where is the rash going to be? Of course, first on the trunks, then on the extremities. Everywhere it's going to be first on the trunk, then on the extremities. So you will say that, ma'am, there is a lot of confusion between this epidemic and endemic. बहुत confusion hai. So is there any test which can differentiate between these two? Yes, there is a Neal-Mooser reaction. Firstly, you have to know, pehle to rat lo. Neal-Mooser reaction is known as Tunica reaction. Tunica means something to do with the scrotum and the testis is being there. So what do? They are gonna do an inoculation into a guinea pig. So for example, you have a patient से हमने लिया उसका blood sample. You take blood sample from a case of epidemic or endemic typhus, and whom do you inject it into? You inject it into a guinea pig, and the guinea pig started showing you scrotal inflammation. That is why you called it Tunica reaction. So if there is scrotal inflammation, this means it is a positive reaction. So remember, who is going to show you? Simple, Neal-Mooser or Tunica reaction किस में आएगा? It is going to come in typhi. Typhi is going to show you the Tunica reaction. So Rickettsia typhi shows positive, Prowaski shows negative. So now tell me, typhi was what? Endemic typhus. Endemic typhus is going to be positive, whereas epidemic typhus is going to be negative. So my simple way of learning was Tunica reaction. Tunica will remind me of the scrotum, some layer of the genital, male genital. So guinea pig ka genital hai, and it is positive in T for typhi. So that is endemic typhus. All of those are done. I don't think I need to teach you the others because I think the others I have already told you in detail. I have told you all the organisms, I've told you their vectors, I've told you in all of them the rash will occur first on the trunk, on the extremities there, but in Rocky Mountain spotted fever it is ulta. Out of these, if I ask you which is the least severe, remember the least severe form is rickettsial pox. So this is sorted for all of us. I think now we can move on and talk about the last one which requires my attention, and that is scrub typhus. Before you start reading onto it, let me tell you one simple story around it. Scrub, shrub, mite, mice. All rhyming words I have got in front of you. What is scrub, shrub, mite, mice? So scrub over here definitely refers to scrub typhus. So scrub se related I said shrub. Why? Because I am telling you a total of 4 things that you're going to have, and these 4 things are going to make a tetrad. So remember, there is a zoonotic tetrad that I'm creating, in which one of the things that has to be there is vegetation or shrubs. So first thing in this tetrad that has to be there is vegetation or shrubs. Along with shrub, now I'm going to correlate, there is something called mite. So of course we know scrub typhus ka vector was mite. Which mite? Trombiculid mite. And mite ka jo larva hota hai, that is known as shiggers. The larva of the mite is basically known as the shigger. So from shrub you can also learn shigger mite. You can also learn shigger mite. So can I call scrub typhus as shigger bone disease because it is related to mite? Instead of calling it mite bone disease, arthropod bone disease, so instead of calling it a mite bone disease, I'm calling it a shiggerosis, shigger bone disease, because it's mite larva. So simple, it's scrub typhus. I need a shrub vegetation for it. I need a mite or a shigger for it, so I call it shigger disease. Apart from that, I also see that there is infection which is carrying in mice or rats. So that is a part of the tetrad, and of course, we too have to be a part of the tetrad. it? Zoonotic tetrad humans. So who are the 4 things? Now repeat. Number 1, you have for scrub typhus, ये तो disease का नाम है. What are the 4 things? Human is one of them. Let's play safe. Human has to be one of them. One is the vegetation, that is shrub. One is the mite larva, which is known as shigerosis or shigers, and then the other one is going to be the mice. Now let's talk about the pathogenesis. So what happens? That is the mite larva, which I call as the shiger, that is always, whenever it enters the body or bites, it is always going to seek the moist area of the body. So they will always go into either the axilla. They will always say there is a blackish lesion that you see in the axilla or in the groin. So some fold of the body where there's a lot of moist environment. So moist area mein jayega, and it is going to result in the formation of an eschar. What is an eschar? Eschar is a very blackish lesion. It's a black color lesion which is seen in all these areas wherever the bite has happened, axilla, groin, jahan bhi hua hai. Apart from that, you see the usual fever related symptoms. Fever, nausea, vomiting, lymphadenopathy, all of that is there. But the most important point is eschars. And if you don't, and many times because they're in hidden areas, they're in the axilla or the groin, so patient has also not seen it. Patient is just coming to you with these features: fever, nausea, vomiting, and you're like wondering ki kya hai, and after 5-7 days you realize that you do a physical examination, you say, I missed a lesion in his axilla. That is the kind of history that you'll get. So by that time there is a high risk of complications. Patient might have gone into multiple organ involvement like pneumonia, ARDS, shock. Those are possibilities. So the take home message point is that there will be an eschar hiding somewhere in the body, and that is hiding in the shrubs. An eschar is hiding in the shrubs of the groin and the axilla. That is how you shall learn it. So how will you do the diagnosis of all of these guys? Specimen, as I said, depends on the disease, which kind of typhus, which organ, whether you need blood or you need skin, that depends. For microscopy, I've told you gram poor hai, and since the chlamydia chapter only, I've been telling you there's a list of these James Bond names: Giemsa, Jimenez, Castaneda, Machiavello, right? So Giemsa, Jimenez, Castaneda, Machiavello are over here. Same for chlamydia also it was this, and for rickettsia also. They are not having any culture media. They are obligate intracellular organisms. So for them, I will need some cells. Either I can take the cells of an animal, like the yolk sac of the egg, that will have cells, or I can use some cell lines. These are all the names of cell lines. If you haven't read cell lines up till now, nothing to worry, because that's a separate topic you study in viruses. It is prepared over there, okay? So remember, either from an animal ka cell ya fir koi cell line, because they will only grow inside a cell. That is the rule. So these points I already know. Same copy paste I did for chlamydia also. So sorted. But there is something different. I want to know how will I do the serology testing. You'll say, ma'am, for everyone serology you do ELISA. Yes, we do that, but there has to be one very primitive test known as the Weil-Felix reaction. What is Weil-Felix reaction? It is an agglutination test, and it is basically a cross reaction. You know what they do? They say that we are going to take the Proteus strains. Which Proteus strains? OX2, OX19 and OXK. And there is a cross reaction. Proteus ka jo antigen hai and rickettsia ka jo antigen hai, they tend to cross react. So the Proteus antigens and the rickettsia antigens, they cross react. So their antibodies will also cross react, right? So what do? I take OX2, OX19 and OXK of the Proteus strains, and I see is my patient's blood showing a response to these. So for example, over here, I saw some of them will show response to only 2 and 19. Some of them shows response to only OXK. Ma'am, do I have to learn this entire table? Bilkul bhi nahi. Big sigh of relief. Thank me for that. You just have to learn one thing. From today onwards, instead of calling it scrub typhus, call it scrub with a K, because please remember, this is the only one showing you OXK positivity. Now you can check. OXK positivity is not coming anywhere else. OXK positivity is only for scrub typhus. So remember, scrub typhus is the only one showing you OXK. All the others are showing you what? OX2 and OX19. Automatic yaad ho gaya na? All the others are showing you OX2 and OX19. But this Brill-Zinsser, do you remember what was Brill-Zinsser? Brill-Zinsser was the reactivated sleeping and reactivation wala form. So I had told you over there also, it doesn't have any vector, it doesn't have any severity. Now I'll tell you it doesn't have any response to even Weil-Felix test. So my simple way of learning it, scrub typhus is the only one. Now starting I told you won't do the table, but I told you such a trick that in one sentence you've done the table. The only one with OXK positivity is scrub typhus. All the others are going to show you OX2 and OX19 positivity, and the reactivated Brill-Zinsser is not going to show you any positivity. So yes, that is going to be a serology, but that has a problem. all these OX2, OX19, OX are Proteus strains. So will I get a false positive antibody response if the patient had a Proteus infection? Yes. And is this sounding to be one of the gold standard tests? Of course not. Please note that the gold standard, if you want to measure antibody, is the indirect fluorescence antibody test. Fluorescence antibody test is gold standard, but Weil Felix is important because it gets you a lot of questions. What about the treatment, guys? It is doxycycline or tetracycline which is given as the treatment, and that wraps up your rickettsia. But with rickettsia, if you remember, rickettsia there's one organism which I've not spoken about, and that family was Coxiella. In fact, there are a certain other number of organisms also that we are going to talk about shortly after Coxiella. So pehle to let's talk about Coxiella. And what did you know about Coxiella? Coxiella was the one that did not have any vector. It did not have any vector. This means it did not have any rash, and it does not even have any Weil Felix test. So basically rickettsia ka opposite. Rickettsia family had a vector, had a rash, had a Weil Felix. This doesn't have a vector, doesn't have a rash, doesn't have a Weil Felix, but it is a part of the rickettsia family, and it is known as Coxiella burnetii, because from today onwards, whenever you will say Coxiella burnetii, everything is going to be, that is how they talk about it. Burnetii matlab, I'm going to add lots of Burnettis to it. Means, firstly, you know it's an intracellular parasite like all other rickettsia family members, but also know that this is going to be implicated in the body by inoculation, inhalation, ingestion. What did I say? Inoculation. So maybe there is some kind of veterinary doctor who's dealing with it. Inhalation may be from the dried feces, and ingestion can be via meat and milk. So definitely we have Coxiella burnetii has come up over here. What else do we need to know? This is something which is important only for the INI CET aspirants and the second prof students, because you have to increase the bulk of your answer. But otherwise, NEET PG FMG students, ये वाला slide skip करो. What is it? Coxiella burnetii can show antigenic variation. And in case the NEET PG and FMG students are still listening to me, that if ma'am is teaching, let me listen, then I think I have accomplished what I had to. I hope I have been able to at least, I know you'll never have interest in this subject, that's never going to happen, but I hope I've simplified it than what you thought it was earlier. So Coxiella ka, there is something known as antigenic phase variation, means it can become less or more antigenic, right? So for example, if you have a fresh isolate from a patient, that is going to be phase 1 antigenic, and phase 1 antigenic is the most powerful. But if you make that pass through different phases, this I guess is an autocorrect, if you make it pass through different embryonated egg or cells like yolk sac, it is now going to enter into phase 2. But if you make it now pass through an animal, it is again going to become more immunogenic and back to phase 1. So there are some variations. Didn't you see? Phase variations happening, out of which I've told you fresh is first. Fresh wala is first. You make it pass through a yolk sac, that is going to become phase 2. You make it pass through a guinea pig, it is going to come back to phase 1. And phase 1 is the more powerful immunogen that we have. Now going into, like I told you, inhalation, ingestion, inoculation, and no rash, no Weil Felix, no arthropod vector. What is it that it's going to cause? Finally, it is going to cause Q fever. We all know this. We know this from our pathology chapters also. Coxiella burnetii causes Q fever. Q was said because they were not aware of what it was. It was query. And this shows you a very famous histopathology right in front of you. That is a donut granuloma. We've done it so many times in pathology. I used to tell you, I have told you, please go to those lectures, chapter 2 of pathology, that whenever there is a donut, you will, like a donut like this, you will make a line out of it and it will start looking like a Q. So donut granuloma is by Q fever, and that is also known as a fibrin ring granuloma. But you said, okay, fine, query fever, but now do you know something about it? Yes, this basically affects the lungs. Primarily is interstitial pneumonia, but apart from that, other organs like the cardiac, hepatitis, ye sab bhi hota hai. But primary, of course, there's a donut granuloma and there is involvement of the lung. Lung and liver are two organs you will remember. What is the lab diagnosis and treatment that you have? I think by now you already know the microscopy. You know the famous 4, Giemsa, Gimenez, Castaneda, Machiavello. So all of these you definitely know because we did for chlamydia, we did for rickettsia, or sub-rickettsia. Serology is also going to be the same. What is the treatment? Again, it is going to be tetracycline like we were studying earlier. But what is the vaccine? This vaccine is not too much in use in India. It is used in Australia. That is Qvax. Qvax, again, sounding only like that for Q fever, Qvax. Q fever ka vaccine is going to be Qvax. I hope, I pray that everything is that simple. Qvax is Q fever ka vaccine being used in Australia. Okay, so Q fever was quite simple. Coxiella burnetii was quite simple. But is our families over? No. We are still left with 2-3 more things. We are going to study something called the Bartonella family. These are also, no, because you said all the Rickettsia are obligate intracellular organisms. You can only grow them in cells. But now we have these Bartonellas. Bartonella say that we will grow in different agars. So bar for blood agar. Remember? Bartonella says, I am gonna grow in a blood agar. So Bartonella is going to grow. That's the Rickettsia, which is not an obligate intracellular organism. Bartonella bacilliformis, Quintana hensley. Very interesting mnemonics. Bacilliformis. Firstly, bacilli. So bacilli matlab some bacteria. Okay. Bartonella, I've told you it's gonna grow on a blood agar. This much you know. Formis, S and F, how is it transmitted? Which arthropod? It is transmitted by a sandfly. Okay, bacilliformis. OR for it is going to cause what fever? Oroya fever or carry-on disease. So remember, whenever you go in the exam and write this, you should be reminded of these mnemonics that I'm telling you. Why? What is it called? It is called bacilliformis. So formis matlab sandfly. It is going to be spread by sandfly, and OR for Oroya fever or carry-on disease. And what is it going to be? A fever and all, to chalo samajh aa gaya, but that is obvious, Oroya fever. But remember, in pathology, it is capable of causing hemolytic anemia. It is going to cause hemolytic anemia. That is something that you have to know. Right? Now, this was bacilliformis. Now, I'm going to Bartonella quintana. Quintana means 5. So, what is it going to be? Pehle to 5. So, matlab it's going to cause the 5-day trench fever, and it is transmitted by the 5 alphabets wala louse. So, if they say tick or flea or louse or mite, so remember, quintana word means 5. So, it's going to cause the 5-day trench fever, and it is going to be transmitted by the 5 alphabet louse. Remember, this is only and only in humans. It doesn't have any animal reservoir. Coming to the last one, Bartonella hensley. Hensley is going to cause everything to do with hemorrhage. Hemorrhage matlab something that is always hemorrhagic. Like for example, if a cat scratches you, bahut bleeding hoga. Cat scratch disease. Cat scratch disease is number 1. Second, bacillary angiomatosis, blood vessels wala problem. Bacillary peliosis, which I've written in liver and spleen. How is this related to blood vessels? What is peliosis? Peliosis means sinusoidal dilation. There is sinusoidal dilation that occurs. Guys, of course I know. What are the blood vessels of the liver and the spleen known as? They're known as sinusoids. So as I told you, Bartonella hensley is going to be everything hemorrhage. If a cat scratches you, or lots of blood vessels, or bacillary peliosis is also blood vessel dilation in liver and spleen. All of those are going to be there, and this is stained by Worden starry silver stain. Very, very important. And I remember teaching you this in pathology also. Worden starry silver stain, because bacillary angiomatosis I have taught you in your vascular pathology chapter. Now please note, Worden starry silver stain can be used for a lot of things, but the 2 main ones that I want you to learn is H. pylori and Bartonella hensley. H. pylori and Bartonella hensley, these 2 you have to know. Otherwise, there are some Borrelia and other ones also, but main are these, Bartonella hensley and H. pylori. So, if I have to ask you now something from pathology, what is the granuloma that you see in cat scratch disease? Last question of this chapter. Yes, what is the granuloma? Something that is looking like a star, something that is showing you these starry projections. So what are those starry projections? Stellate granuloma. So I'll quickly revise. Stellate granuloma was seen in 2 conditions in pathology. It was seen in number 1, cat scratch disease, which is this Bartonella hensley, and secondly, it is seen in lymphogranuloma venereum. So coming back, I hope, if I have to do a very, very quick recap with all of you, Bartonella is belonging to Rickettsia, but it can be grown in bar, that is blood agar. Bacilliformis, I hope you remember, formis, F and S, sandfly, OR for Oroya fever or carry-on disease. Quintana means 5-day trench fever, 5 alphabet louse, and hensley is going to be everything to do with hemorrhage, cat scratch, angiomatosis, peliosis, all of those. Now the last organism that we are left with in this entire family is the genus Ulricea, which has come as an INI CET question in 2022. So it's important that we touch upon it, not very important for NEET or FMG. Genus Ulricea has 3 things under it: human lymphocytic ulriciosis, human monocytic ehrlichiosis, and human granulocytic anaplasmosis. I'll start with this weird sounding wala. Baki sab to was ehrlichiosis. What is the human granulocytic anaplasmosis? Because over here, first word is granulocytic. So granulocytes are neutrophils. They are definitely gonna affect the neutrophils, and I can also see anaplasma has N, so neutrophils. That is how, because I'll show you some questions and you need to know which cells. If you forget in the exam कि अच्छा anaplasmosis was human granulocytic anaplasmosis or human monocytic or human lymphocytic, so you should know anaplasma basically has AN in it. So A will remind you of anaplasma and N will remind you of neutrophils or granulocytes. So it is a human granulocytic anaplasmosis that is going to be spread by the ixodid ticks. Now we come to the ehrlichiosis. Either the ehrlichiosis can have lymphocytes or the ehrlichiosis can have monocytes. So please remember that mono, single. Who wants to say single? Chi-chi. No one wants to say single. So Ehrlichia schaffensis. So this is this chi-chi thing that I just told you, schaffensis. Schaffensis is the one that is going to cause an increase in monocytes, and this wala tick, different wala tick. Kaun sa? It is the emblyoma tick. So remember that chi-chi, single, no one wants to say single. So monocytic ehrlichiosis is caused by Ehrlichia schaffensis, and it is going to be M wala monocytic, so emblyoma tick is going to spread it. Now what am I left with? Human lymphocytic ehrlichiosis. This is caused by Neo. The organism is different. It is Neorickettsia sinetsu. Sinetsu is a Japanese name. Japanese eat fish. So this is because of the ingestion of fish. So now you have read so much about it. I will revise it once. But hota kya hai? What is this Ehrlichia and anaplasma that we are talking about? So please note that all of them are going to have some very, very basic things which you are very, very difficult to pick up. Fever, headache, myalgia, rash, and DIC can happen as a severity to every disease. So very basic things like any other rickettsia it is having. Fever and rash, every rickettsia has it. So there's nothing particular that you have. I just want all of you to know the different names of it. So let's repeat. Human lymphocytic ehrlichiosis, human monocytic ehrlichiosis, and granulocytic anaplasmosis. Firstly, as soon as I wrote anaplasma, so I know कि A for anaplasma, N for neutrophils, तो ये granulocyte वाला है, and this is going to be by the ticks. Now we have monocytic. Mono, that is chi-chi, so Ehrlichia schaffensis, and mono, so emblyoma tick is going to cause it. Human lymphocytic ehrlichiosis is by Neorickettsia sinetsu, and sinetsu is a Japanese name. Japanese eat fish. Baki symptoms of all are the same: fever, lymph node, rash, and all of that. So if I show you this particular structure, you will say the first picture that I see, what cell is this from pathology, guys? You know it, this is a neutrophil. And what is this kidney shaped wala nucleus? What is that kidney shaped nucleus? That is always a monocyte. And in both of them, can you see some inclusions? These are known as the morula or the Mulberry inclusions. This is what came in the INICET exam. These are the morula or the Mulberry inclusions. But then you said that, ma'am, both of them are showing. How will I know it is Ehrlichia or whether it is anaplasma? So now tell me, if neutrophil ka photo diya tha, you had to mark anaplasma in the exam. Right? And if monocyte picture was given, mono, chi-chi wala I was saying na, Ehrlichia schaffensis you had to mark in the exam. So simple, now you'll have to pick up in the exam that what exactly has been shown. So this is where students got confused, which shows neutrophil, which shows monocyte. Anaplasma shows neutrophil and monocyte is affected by Ehrlichia. Yes, we finished with this chapter as well. We can do a very, very quick discussion of one or two questions. Can you tell me, where are you using the Neal-Moser or the Tunica reaction to differentiate what? I know it is done for differentiating the endemic and the epidemic typhus. Epidemic has a P, so that is caused by Provarsky. Endemic is caused by typhi, so it's actually done to differentiate between option number 1. Let's go on to the next one. Look at this question. Okay, someone called A presented with fever, headache, myalgia, rash on the trunk. Okay, he gave a history of visit to the Uttarakhand forest about 10 days back, and he was given ceftriaxone but worsened despite the treatment. Later, a lesion was found missed earlier in the axillary region, something in the moist, hiding in the shrubs. What was that disease? Hiding in the shrubs of the axilla and the groin. Shrubs wala scrubs. So hiding in the shrubs of the axilla and the groin is the scrub disease. Of course, that is what we had studied, that you will see all these things, but you will miss out that lesion called Escher. Of course, this is the sugar bone disease or the shrub disease. I hope that is okay. Now coming to the next. Which of these is the correct match? This, of course, I'm sure you should be able to pick up. Let's start. Rickettsia prowazki, P. Which typhus? Epidemic, endemic. Epidemic karata hai. Endemic is written. Wrong. Okay, Rickettsia akari. Akari causes rickettsial pox. Brill rinser is that sleeping and waking up, reactivated wala. Wrong. Rickettsia corneri. I had said corona was more in India. So Indian tick typhus, not scrub. Scrub was caused by S. Susugamushi. Wrong. Corneri. I had said corona was more in India. So Indian tick typhus, not scrub. Scrub was caused by S. Susugamushi. Wrong. Bartonella quintana. So Bartonella quintana causing the 5-day trench fever. This seems to be right. Of course, this is the right statement over here. So just a few questions which I wanted to discuss, and I hope you are also solving the Q bank side by side. So we're done with this, and now we're going to move on to the last chapter of bacteriology, where I've gotten all the tiny 2 slides wala organisms which you need to know, like Mycoplasma, the Campylobacter, Helicobacter, some Bacillus, and some few miscellaneous here and there that you need to know, with which you wrap up your bacteriology section.